Up until recently, the Irish Central Bank were still buying Israeli war bonds. The Israelis have gone on record to say that without the purchase of those bonds, there can be no war machine. A lot of the feedback I get from Zionists is that I'm anti-Semitic. If you're getting that feedback, you know you're doing a good job. So I was saying, I don't care who jumps on the bandwagon, we just need all the voices because we want the killing to stop. Why would you align with that ideology that hates you? Like, Jesus, that's a big question, yeah.
There are so many different avenues for solidarity with the Palestinian people. You know, you can go to the marches, you can make some speeches, you can do direct action, which is outlawed in some parts of the world, but other avenues include comedy. And our guest today is a veteran of comedy skits.
All those.
All of those. Bringing to light the absurdity of colonialism and racism and the such. So I'm very honoured to have with me today Tadhg.
Whoa, perfect pronunciation.
Tadhg.
Don't, that never happens. This guy does his research.
I did my research. I've listened to a few podcasts where they spend like 15 minutes trying to get it right. And so,
yeah. Fair play, yeah.
But we got it right on the first, thankfully. I had to practice in the mirror, obviously, early this morning. But yeah, thank you for joining us.
Oh man, pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So as I was telling you earlier, I went through kind of your backlog of stuff.
Greatest hits.
Greatest hits. And I went through like kind of the early stuff, and I found one video which I found intriguing, which is of, I think it was you commenting, or the sketch was commenting on Brexit.
Right.
And you were talking about how, you know, it's like seeing your bully in the, was it on the middle of the road smacking themselves with a shoe or something like that. Tell us a bit about what got you into, you know, doing these comedy sketches and making them political.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I started off wanting to just do comedy, you know, and I wasn't sure exactly what my message would be in the comedy. I wasn't really, I was always interested in politics, but comedy, they seemed to like be separate or something in my mind. And like the type of comedy I was originally attracted to was kind of surreal, often British comedy, like the Young Ones and Rick Mail and these types of people that were like, you know, just making me laugh, and it didn't necessarily have to be political ideology being inserted in it or whatnot. And I was in a reasonably successful comedy troupe in Ireland. We had like a couple of sitcoms and stuff. We were called Cahoots, and it was surreal comedy and whatnot. But I was always trying to just kind of impinge on the group with political sketches and sketches about British imperialism, and it didn't quite fit the group. And also in Ireland, in the kind of commercial landscape, when you do provocative political comedy, it gets you into trouble because people have this impression around the world of Ireland being a very kind of pro-resistance, kind of anti-imperialist country. And the people are, but we probably will get into this later, the powers that be are absolutely not. Like the powers that be are still very beholden to kind of British and particularly US interests. So anything that's in any way critical of kind of capitalism or colonialism or anything like that is a bit kind of, a bit of a no-no. So it was actually COVID where the comedy troupe were coming to an end. I was at home on my own. I had a tour planned. All my gigs were cancelled. I was at home with my buddy, and the two of us were just in a house looking at each other, kind of breeding contempt for each other. And we decided to just make some sketches. So like he was in them. Sometimes he was shooting them. I was using what wigs were upstairs. We started making sketches about British imperialism and whatnot. And genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, it wasn't like I didn't sit down with a business plan. It was like absolute desperation in COVID, trying to keep myself sane. And to my great shock, one of the first sketches we did, which was, I think it was called Britain, but it's a school reunion. And it's about this lad coming back to the school reunion, boorish and drunk and punching everyone's arms, and like the characters like India, Ireland, everyone who's been directly bullied by him and affected by him, and they're all like, man, it wasn't fun, like you're imagining it differently, like we hate you, like. Yeah. And the sketch went like crazy viral, and I suddenly realized, oh my god, Pete, there's an appetite for this. I couldn't believe it, because again, in my mind, I'm quite a, what would you call it, a compartmentalizer. So comedy and the kind of political, historical stuff I was reading occupied two different spaces in my mind. And suddenly, accidentally, they were smashed together out of desperation and loneliness and COVID. And that was just a gear shift in the comedy. And I was just doing that stuff then thereafter. And it kind of built a little bit of a profile for that. And then the last so-called war on Gaza before this genocide, which I think was 2021.
21, yeah.
That's when I started to make some, I suppose, what you might describe as pro-Palestine content. Even though I'd always been a supporter of Palestine. If you're Irish and you're Irish Republican and you're doing a bit of reading and you have a bit of awareness, you know that Palestine is the centre of every kind of anti-imperialist cause. But specifically using the comedy for the pro-Palestine message, that would have kicked off, I think, in 2021.
And the theme or the kind of template you used was this house share thing called.
Yes.
Right. Could you tell us, is that like a thing is it a very well-known thing in Cork?
No, it's a kind of a thing I invented, to be honest with you, again out of necessity, right? So necessity is the mother of invention and all that. I'm notoriously bad at accents, right? So I used to do a lot of like straight theatre, like not comedy stuff at all. And I've done little bits of TV and film and whatnot. And it's always a thing with a director where they're like, how are we going to negotiate the fact that this guy can't do accents? And I'm often just let do my own, they just let me have my own accent, and somehow a Cork guy is in this play in Tennessee or... So when I found myself at home on my own with my wigs, I just thought, like, you know, there's actually a nice reasoning for me having a Cork accent, even if I'm playing China, even if I'm playing Taiwan, even if I'm playing Cuba, if I'm playing US, because it has this democratizing effect and nobody can accuse me of being racist because I've just put on a pink shirt and then suddenly now I'm, you know, Papua New Guinea, and yet I speak like I'm from Cork. So everyone's from Cork, everyone's in a house share. And I think what's nice about it, again, it did absolutely come from a kind of necessity thing, but as it was getting up on its feet, I saw the utility of it being everyone is equal. And also it kind of is a nice commentary on the absurdity, as you said in your intro, of geopolitics generally, especially when you've got major players on the scene at the moment like the US, which kind of treats everyone like kids in the schoolyard and they're the school bully. And when they decide that they're taking their ball home, they take their ball home, and they decide that that group, we should be like angry towards that group, or this guy is suddenly now the good guy. You know, it's geopolitics are at its very root like quite childish. So the idea of like a load of kind of man children in a rental in Cork together also spoke to the housing crisis that's ongoing in Ireland. It seemed to be a nice kind of melting pot of ideas. And again, to my great surprise, people were interested in it.
And then your content strategy, if you will, kind of shifted a little bit post 7 October. And you start making these sketches where like Israel's beating up some guy, and I'm watching them, I'm like, this is so accurate. Do you like just watch the news and be like, they're just writing the comedy for me?
Yeah, I mean, the only downside to the Hasbara being so ridiculous is that it is so ridiculous at times that I feel like it satirizes itself. So for instance, what's that lad, Daniel... he's the previous spokesperson, like 2 spokespeople ago for the IDF. The guy who was pointing... Hagari, that's it. You know, the guy who was pointing at the calendar and it was just like...
list.
Say again?
He's a list.
He's a list, exactly. That guy, for me, was like... He is satirizing himself. And he was a meme overnight.
Yeah.
So it was very hard to satirize that because... you know what? They're so used to impunity, they can't see how ridiculous they are.
Right.
You know... So yes, they're ripe for satire, but B, they're so ridiculous. Sometimes they push it so far. I've got nothing to... Because good satire has got something to say. It's commenting on the thing, sending it up so that you can see now in its larger than life kind of iteration, you can see how ridiculous the thing is and you ridicule the power. But because they're ridiculing themselves, they sometimes push satirists out. But thank you for saying that there's a kind of an accuracy there. That the reason for that, if I would say one positive thing about myself in this whole process, is that I just do the reading. So you can't just do satire and jump on a kind of a trend, because you get all these goofballs coming at you afterwards going, this is wrong, this is inaccurate. A lot of the feedback I get from Zionists is that I'm anti-Semitic. if you're getting that feedback, you know you're doing a good job. Because they just say that to everything. Like, I'm anti-Semitic, the Pope is anti-Semitic, every human rights organisation ever is anti-Semitic, Miss Rachel is anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
They don't come at me and say, that's inaccurate, that never happened. So then I know I've done the reading. So I would say, you know, I'm speaking like an old man here now, but if you're getting involved in this type of, as you say, activism, and I think it's kind of comedy resistance is the way I would kind of look at it. Do your research, make sure you do the reading, and then do your satire, because then it's harder for them to come at you.
At what point do you think you realised that their propaganda or Hasbara just became ridiculous?
Like, as I was saying to you before we went on camera, I have good Palestinian friends, and like one of my friends in Dublin says that it's always been ridiculous, that their Hasbara to Palestinians has always been laughable. But because they've enjoyed this kind of impunity, it has gone unchallenged until the social media age, I suppose. And this genocide has gone on so long. Israel have a big problem when their war crimes go on so long. That's why I thought they were quite expert in a really, you know, malevolent way to get in and do their mow the lawn, as they describe it. Because not enough people get engaged with what's going on. They don't read about the history. They don't read about what's going on in the West Bank. They don't read about apartheid. Even forget Gaza for a second and what you described earlier. And when they do that reading, they realise that this is a monstrous project, that Israel is a completely racist, monstrous ideology. So I think what's happened this time is, and I'm taking my lead again from Palestinians, that it's always been ridiculous, but now just the eyes are on it, focus is on it. I do think people are more kind of tech savvy as well. Like, I think they imagine that, you know, people would just not know that it was the Arabic, you know, days of the week on the wall. Like, they keep taking punts that, like, people just don't realise. It's mad. And you only do that, I think, if you're used to a level of impunity that's actually quite insane. So I think people have just cottoned on, and they're exploring more the ways in which they kind of deceive. But you're definitely, I mean, there's been a massive shift lately, as you know yourself, and you're getting all these people who I would have thought would never speak up for Palestine are now saying things like Israel are lying. So it's horrific that it's taken all these 70, 80, 90, 100,000 lives. Horrific. But at least people are seeing what you and I might have seen for years, which is that, like, this is a ridiculous, for all the money they have, the propaganda is still laughable.
When would you say you kind of woke up to what's happening in Palestine? Was that like something you grew up with as a kid?
Like, I think the Irish have a unique, I would say, opportunity, not even a perspective, but we're kind of like one of the only white people in Europe anyway, or like ostensibly white people, that understand this type of struggle innately. It's in our bones, it's in our history. For people in the north of Ireland, it's not even a kind of a historical artifact. It's something that they still live with. They still live with the injustice of the British state. You know, there's friends of mine who are waiting for justice for their loved ones for 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the north. And they will be denied it. Like, it's never going to happen. That's what a colonial, bullying, oppressive force does. You know, it carries out atrocities, and then it goes out of its way to obfuscate and deny the victims justice. So, like, Palestine is just, if you didn't see Palestine in yourself and in your own struggle, like, you're just not paying attention, you know what I mean? So I say all that by means of explaining I didn't kind of, you know, wake up one day and be like, oh, what's going on in Palestine? I better check that out. Like, you know, I've been fed this story. It's not like that. We weren't really fed an Israeli narrative in the same way that people maybe who were brought up in Britain or America or Germany were. And because I would be very proudly Irish Republican, I'm an Irish nationalist, an anti-colonial nationalist, obviously not an ethno-nationalist as you kind of get in Britain and America and whatnot. Palestine is always in my consciousness and in my heart. Like, if you go, and I'd recommend to any Palestinian who wants to visit Ireland, first place you should go is Derry and West Belfast, because you will see more Palestine flags than you will Ireland flags. And that didn't happen after October 7th. There's a deep, spiritual, meaningful solidarity with substance, connection between the two nations that have so much in common. So for me, it's always been the Irish Republican, Irish anti-imperialist message has always been internationalist. It's always been about standing with oppressed people wherever they are. Cuba, South Africa, and Palestine, as I say. I think Nelson Mandela, didn't he, say that it's the moral issue of our time. And it's always been the moral issue of our time for anybody of an anti-imperialist bent.
Let's talk a bit about Ireland. Now, people are probably familiar with kind of what's happened in the north, because the British control of the north remains still today. But maybe they're not so familiar with how British colonialism affected those in the south. And you from Cork,
Yeah.
like right at the bottom of the island. Could you tell us a bit about that experience in the south of Ireland, the experience of British colonialism there?
Of course. So, like, I mean, let me give you one kind of startling literal connection between British colonialism in my city and British colonialism in your country. So in the 20s, a British force called the Black and Tans, which were the worst of the worst. These were the World War I soldiers that like had lost their minds because of whatever they had done or whatever they had seen in World War I. They were psychopaths, and they were the dregs of the British military establishment sent to Ireland to carry out brutality largely against the civilian population. They burnt my city to the ground, right? Absolutely destroyed it. It had to be rebuilt as a reprisal to Cork resistance fighters fighting against the British Empire. So that was their way of replying in kind. Very Israeli, isn't it? You know, we throw a stone at you and we throw a stone at you so you kill our family kind of thing. Some of those soldiers who would have been stationed in Cork, some of those Black and Tans, literally the same soldiers, after the War of Independence in the south of Ireland, when Ireland was partially liberated from the British Empire, became what was called the Irish Free State, which is where I live, which today is called the Republic of Ireland. I would argue it's not a republic yet because we haven't been united. It's not a socialist 32-county republic, but it's a 26-county republic. But anyway, some of those literal soldiers were then transported to British Mandate for Palestine to carry out their violence against the civilian population of Palestine. So it's not even just spiritual, the connection, it's actually literal in some cases. But as you say, like, the south of Ireland was liberated from British colonial rule that went on for about between 700 and 800 years. So, like, it doesn't happen overnight. And then, with a gun to our head, the Irish were forced to accept partition of the country because the British Prime Minister at the time, Lloyd George, basically threatened the Irish with total war, total destruction. Again, sounds quite Israeli, doesn't it? We will destroy you if you don't accept our piece of shit peace deal, which sounds a bit like the Oslo Accords in many ways to me. So the parallels are uncanny, but then the North was left in a situation where it was formed as an apartheid state. It was formed so that the Irish Catholic nationalist community, which were the majority, would never have power. So there was a thing called gerrymandering went on to make sure that the British Unionist population would always have control over the Catholic nationalist minority in the North. And this is a whole other, I mean, I'll spend the whole podcast talking about it if you're not careful, but just to say the South where I live, looking back on it historically, didn't do enough to support our brothers and sisters in the North who were living in an apartheid state and were brutalised. There were pogroms against the nationalist Catholic population. But this is all a consequence of British colonialism. So when you're trying to decolonise, these are some of the consequences where your country is partitioned, an artificial partition, which again, other victims of British colonialism know all about. And right up until today, it's now a peaceful movement, but it was an armed military movement to reunite the country. And if Ireland, and I believe in the next 10 years there will be a border poll in Ireland, when Ireland because it will be a when, to sort of discredit the role that the resistance played in Ireland would make about as much sense as discrediting the role that the ANC played in liberating South Africa. So there's so many routes to Palestinian liberation, but the resistance fighters who actually are out there doing the fighting, Like, I feel I'm doing some fighting, but I'm doing comedy. The people who are actually fighting, you know, every group commits war crimes. I don't in any way condone attacks against civilians, but I think the demonization of resistance fighters, when, for instance, the Israeli state or the British state killed far more civilians, committed far more atrocities against civilian infrastructure and civilians literally, I think you've lost the plot, like if you try and demonize or monstrify these resistance fighters. So that's a long-winded way of giving you a quick overview of 800 years of an attempted Irish liberation, which isn't complete yet because, as you say, the north of the country, those Catholic nationalist communities, they don't live as second-class citizens now. We've come a long way. They're excelling now in the north in Catholic nationalist areas of the one where there's areas where there's more development, more infrastructure. The Irish language is completely resurging in the north of Ireland, but we still have British jurisdiction over the north of Ireland, and I feel that within the next 10 years we'll have a border poll to end that.
You know, you reminded me there with what you were saying about the BBC documentary, you know, where the narrator, 14-year-old child, was disqualified, or his narrative and his experience was disqualified because of who his father was. Well, you know, his father wasn't a resistance fighter, he was some deputy minister of agriculture or something. But it's just like, if this guy's disqualified because his father was member of government and they carried out 7th of October, then how are Israelis not disqualified for doing 7th of October 50 times over?
Yes.
That's just the world we live in.
And it also speaks to a kind of an ignorance around resistance, doesn't it? Right? So I'm not here to get you or me into trouble and say, let's all join the resistance. I'm not saying that for a moment. But let's have an honest conversation about what so-called resistance fighters, or what the West, I suppose, would describe them as terrorists, like Hamas, like it or not, is the government in Gaza. So there's people who are part of the government structures in Gaza that probably have never picked up a gun in their life, but they have to carry out a function within the political bureau of Hamas, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, democratically voted in. You know, I apparently the West loves, you know, democracy, and it loves free elections. Like, for somebody to be disqualified because a relative of theirs is associated with the government of Gaza, you're then getting into a situation where I think most of the Gazan population would have to be disqualified. And then what you're doing is you are upholding the racist Israeli propaganda that there are no innocent people in Gaza. You know, so I think it's we still are nowhere near ready to do it, but I think there's an urgent need for a mature conversation about this nonsense idea of terrorism. The word terrorism has lost all meaning, I think. And the group that dare not speak its name in Britain, I think that will be seen as a major moment in that story. When you start prescribing groups that carry out, you can say that they carry out unlawful acts, of course, but to describe them as terrorists and to proscribe them as terrorists, I think we're into farce now at this point. I mean, anyone commits any crime at this point now, like you're just saying there, or they don't even have to commit a crime. They could be interested in committing a crime. They could think about a crime. You just call them a terrorist and they're gone. You don't have to think about them anymore. It's farce, and it's classic colonialism. You know,
I'd argue that terrorism never had a meaning, to be honest.
Yeah,
never meant anything, because it's just these guys. They don't even need to utilize violence some of the time, but they're a group we don't like.
Yeah.
And essentially in discourse, in public discourse, it doesn't really help go anywhere or achieve anything, because you're just explaining, or you're just describing to your viewers or whoever that you don't like this person or you don't like this group. But really and truly, it's not.
Yes.
It doesn't have an objective definition that you can just.
That's a very good point. I was at a conference the other day there, and we met, and there was a representative from the South African delegation put a map on the wall of the countries in the world that recognise the state of Palestine. And I was just thinking to myself, that map, because as you know, like vast swathes of the world recognise Palestine at this point, and it's just the major colonial powers, European and their their Anglospheric iterations in Australia and Canada, these countries don't recognize Palestine. It's pretty much the same for the prescription map.
Yeah.
You know, like these resistance groups are seen as resistance groups in vast swathes of the world. But again, the colonial powers see them as terrorists. So I think it speaks so much to the white supremacist view of the world that what we're doing is good, you know, somehow. Now, there's going to be collateral damage. Unfortunately, hundreds of thousands of people are going to have to be murdered, but we're fighting terrorism. And I just don't think people are buying it anymore, man. And again, I keep going back to it, and people are probably sick to death of me saying it, but the Irish have a unique perspective on this. That's why I implore Irish people to speak up at the moment, because we've been hit by the same playbook. Like, we know the thing of, like, we oppress you, we try to destroy your language, your culture, your way of life. If you fight back, you're a terrorist. So just let's get this clear. Like, we take everything from you, you know, we destroy you, we pull you off your land, and we put Scottish and English planters on your land. And if you fight back, you're the bad guy. So, yeah. The one positive is that the stuff that maybe you and I knew for years ago, this is bullshit. It seems like, you know, Pierce Morgan is now accepting it's bullshit. Bob Geldof, you know, the kind of high society kind of centrists, the two-siders, like, are kind of going, maybe actually it's not a two-sides thing.
Who's that guy? From the Restless Politics. Campbell.
Oh my God, Alistair Campbell.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah, and he's you know, he was in bed with.
He's a war criminal, like. Yeah, I'll say it, man. I'll say it.
Yeah, Rory Stewart more so, and that's probably why he's still not coming around. Nevertheless, these people, I think, it's less that they actually see, or maybe they see already, but it's less that they've changed their mind, but rather they've changed their stance because now there's possibly going to be some backlash.
Of course, and you know, I don't know what your take on this is, but I've mixed feelings about it. Like, a few months ago, I was saying, I don't care who jumps on the bandwagon, we just need all the voices because we want the killing to stop. And I still feel that way. You know, how would a Palestinian in the West Bank or Gaza right now feel about me, some Irish lad, going, oh, no, I don't want to hear these voices, they're just cynical for it. Like, I would imagine they just want as many voices as possible to get the killing to stop. But when the dust settles, we need to call these people out. Like, they can't get away with this. I mean, I couldn't watch any more than about 30 seconds of it, but I saw that Rest is Politics podcast where the two lads looked at each other kind of grimacing, going, oh God, it's very bad what's going on in Gaza, isn't it? What were you watching for the last 20 months? Really, like, I want to know what new image came in that you thought, oh, this is actually, this is a bad thing now, is it? Like, there was people in Gaza telling us that it was a genocide on October 8th. You know what I mean? It's just like, we all knew what was coming. You know, and so for somebody after this length of time to say, oh, you know, I think it's a little bit of a genocide, is it? Oh, I better, you know, I actually did a sketch on this recently where, you know, some writer, I was saying, like, this writer can no longer hold his tongue. Like, you know, like, he held his tongue for 20 months, no problem. But he can no longer hold his tongue at the moment. So he's coming out now and he's saying, you know, yeah, I think it's a genocide. I think it, you know, if I hold on any longer, I'll be a Holocaust denier. But if I came out earlier, I'd be an Islamist. So now I think this is the moment that'll be most expedient for my career, like, going forward. I'll be able to do both sides. I mean, these people are scum, to be honest. And I used the word carefully, but, like, I don't think they have a soul, you know, like, but yeah. But then at the end of the day, like, I suppose it's good, you know. I was saying it last night at some event, like, it's the Bob Geldof metric, like, I would use. Like, if Bob Geldof is speaking out, the tide must have turned, like, you know what I mean? So
yeah, it's an indicator. That's how I see it.
It's an indicator, yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's difficult to kind of think, you know, these same people who have been egging on, you know, someone like Piers Morgan, who spread the 40 dead babies lie at the beginning and then denied he did it after.
And as someone said last night, has made an unbelievable career out of Gaza.
Yeah.
Like, his numbers have gone through the roof because of Gaza. No, we all have to look at ourselves for that, right? I have been given opportunities. I've met amazing people. You know, I've got to work with great people. I had a platform to begin with. The platform has amplified. We all look at ourselves. But that man, like, that man is like laughing all the way to the bank, and he thinks he's a good guy because he let a few Palestinians get a sentence in. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's absolute scumbag. All his money is painted with Palestinian blood. That's the truth
Yes.
of it. But I think a miscalculation these people have made is that things won't go back to normal after this is over.
No.
They can't just go back and pretend like they'd always said yes. This is the landscape that we're in today is completely different from the landscape of like the political landscape we had before.
I agree. That's a very good point, yeah. But because they don't have a soul, you see, they don't know that, I think. They're still counting that this is a kind of like Chilean miners kind of thing. Like, they're getting in on it late. Like, you know, it's like the water, what was that? Like, bucket challenge or something, you know? It's like they've got in on the trend a bit late. Yeah. And they're just making sure that their names are on it. Like, okay, we got in late. We can see that. We should have got in earlier. But as you say, like, they're imagining that we're going to be in the same world, but you know what? I actually don't, in a way, I don't care about them. I want people to continue calling them out for sure, but I'm not going to waste my time in a post-genocide world, like, you know, having a checklist of like, oh, who have we remembered to kind of like mess with this guy's life? It's just, I don't want anything to do with them. Like, I worked with people beforehand on a much smaller level that I now have no respect for whatsoever. Like, if you, there's people in my life, you know, in the comedy world, say, like, comedians are like the most cowardly people I've ever met in my life. They're just a disgrace. There's, even in Britain, like, there's Frankie Boyle and Jen Brister, and there's a few others, and I'm loads start mentioning more people now because I'll forget. There's a good few great people, but mostly the comedy landscape is an absolute disgrace. Like, they're just completely self-obsessed. It's like, is this good for my... And actually, Jen Brister, I hope she won't mind me saying, like, I was speaking to her at an event recently where both, she was like, a lot of them just don't care. It's not that they're just not connected to it. You know what I mean? They're not in the kind of the world outside of their own head and outside of their own jokes and outside their, I'm going to do my material. And I don't think I've ever felt so disgusted with the world that I came from, you know, because it's just... And the other thing that you get in the comedy world, and you get it just in the general white person world, is like my mental health. Like, I'm just so sick of that. Like, you know, of course you take your mental health breaks. I've taken many myself, but to say I can't look at it anymore, I can't advocate anymore, I have to look after myself. Wow, like, that's amazing solidarity, isn't it? You know, you'd say to somebody in Gaza, look, I did enough for you, like, I posted a few things, then my mental health started getting affected, so now you must die. You must just be murdered now because I'm going shopping. You know, piss off, like.
While my country continues to
exactly
arm the Israelis and
exactly, like, bombs. Yeah, I've suddenly now become okay with it because I was getting a little bit sad about it there last week.
Bullshit. And the thing is with the comedy scene is a lot of these comedians, well, a lot of the ones that are, you know, in circulation these days, or the famous ones, they're so-called free speech absolutists. Right?
Yeah.
They're always complaining about how they're being censored because they don't get to speak anything. They don't get to say anything. They don't get to attack, you know, people with alternative lifestyles, etc. But, you know, when it comes to Palestine, there is actually a freedom of speech issue there.
Of course.
But they'll never take that on.
Like, one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life, if you could call it funny, was like when Bob Villan was getting, you know, when the band were getting their visas revoked and stuff. You had all these GB News types coming out of the woodwork going, get them, you know, deported, get their visas revoked. Like, all these people are literally on people were able to pull up the tweets. They're on record of saying, Britain is lost. You can't say anything anymore. Oh my God, like, you have to be able to agree to disagree, speak your mind. Now suddenly they said something nasty and mean and naughty against a foreign army in a field. They're a punk band, like, they did what punk bands do. And suddenly all these, like, you know, GB News types were kind of going, oh no, just shut them up. So I think the free speech thing is yet another kind of idea that we now realise is just a concept. International law, free speech, rules-based order, human rights. You know, I don't want to get too cynical, man, but sometimes I wake up and I kind of feel like, you know, is this what anarchy feels like? Because there are no rules, there are no order. To go back to Ireland for a second, if you don't mind, like, Ireland is in a real moment, right? And a lot of people don't know about it, but there's a huge issue for the Zionist project that centres in Ireland at the moment. We're trying to pass the Occupied Territories Bill, which if people don't know about it, my friend Senator Francis Black tabled this bill in 2008, and it would ban trade with the occupied territories. So that's goods and services from the occupied territories. It's not so-called Israel. It doesn't even go that far. It's just the occupied territories for now. And the Americans are forcing the Irish government to at least water it down to goods, which would be ridiculous because goods is only 10% of the trade, right? It's all services these days because of tech and all that shit. But even with goods on the table, the pressure from the American pro-Zionist lobbies on Ireland right now, they're threatening us with economic obliteration, basically, because big pharma and big tech, that's the Irish economy. Big American pharma and tech, we're a European headquarters for Google and Facebook and all this rubbish. So Ireland is now faced with a kind of an economic existential kind of crisis. You can either go with your soul and what the people want. Like we've got like hundreds of thousands of people marching every week, like, or you can choose business. And I will say one thing for the Irish government. I don't like them and I disagree with everything that they've ever done ever. But it is a tricky situation, and this is you know, it's not very straightforward. Like I'm an old school kind of lefty. Like I'd be just like, oh, fuck it, like get rid of the business interests and we'll rebuild a socialist utopia and we'll free Palestine and stuff. But I understand that people have jobs and we have to screw our heads on and stuff. But this is the insidiousness, to use your word, of the Zionist lobby. It gives you these impossible decisions, you know. And that's why they're so strong and they're so well organised, and that's why we have to be stronger and better organised ourselves.
But where are they going to move these businesses to? Because I mean, they have, well, there's two main reasons for them to be an island, right? There's the tax incentives, and the access to the EU.
Yes.
Where else can they get that?
True. Yeah, and it's an English-speaking country and stuff. But I'd be loathsome to say that Ireland holds all the cards, though. You know, like our leader went to the White House recently and it was like, you know, gave a sycophantic display in front of Donald Trump, like, you know, please don't leave us. And again, I just, you know, it makes me physically sick, but I understand it. We can't commit economic suicide, but then what price your soul? And I believe the Irish people are amazing. Like, you know, the Irish government are a disgrace, but the Irish people consistently are amazing. If we don't pass the Occupied Territories Bill, the feeling of revulsion in Ireland at what Israel is doing, it's actually beautiful. It makes me feel very proud to be Irish. And I feel like there's, you know, like there's a moment I think that's approaching where people are just not going to settle for pissy speeches anymore. People are ready to riot. I'm not, again, telling people to riot. I'm interested in getting home and not getting stopped at the airport. But I'm just saying that ordinary people, not mad lefties, like not Marxist revolutionaries, ordinary mothers and grandmothers and sons and daughters are so righteously angry at what's going on. They're ready to not play by the rules anymore. That's just something that I've observed.
There's an interesting thing about Ireland, which is when you think about European solidarity for Palestine, you think, okay, there's no one more kind of a more stronger an ally than the Irish people. But at the same time, I heard the other day that Ireland has the kind of the largest the largest trade dealings with Israel in Europe.
This is what I'm saying, man, you know, and there was a time where I was trying to like kind of hide this a little bit. Like, so if I was asked to do any interviews or anything with anyone outside Ireland, like someone like this, I would try and, like, you know, keep that on the low, keep it low key, because it's embarrassing. But now I'm so pissed off with the Irish government's inaction and indifference that I think it's important that we call it out, because it's part of a collective thing that you get in Europe and the West, which is we're really strong on pro-Palestine rights and stuff. I mean, you even get it in Spain and Norway, these other countries that have been, you know, held up as paragons of Palestinian solidarity. But actually what it is let's be very careful to differentiate between the Irish people and the Irish state. The Irish people would bring a tear to your eye as a Palestinian person if you go to any small town in my own county of Cork, there are pro-Palestine campaigns in little towns, and like I'm talking villages, like there might be a few thousand people tops in the village. Like that would be a big one. Few hundred some places. There's a friend of mine in Inishman, a tiny little island off the it's one of the Aran Islands off the coast of, say, Galway, right, in the west of Ireland. There's a few hundred people. There's a big Palestine community there. Like they've got maybe 30 or 40 people at their marches constantly. The people are incredible. The Irish government are like the polar opposite. They're a disgrace. Because, go back to Americans, the US empire and the Zionist entity, they're one and the same. They're hand in glove. So because we're so beholden to US multinationals, we can't be but Zionist. I'm not saying the Irish governments go home and they believe in Zionist ideology necessarily, but what they really believe in is cash. So they're over a barrel a little bit. So you rightly point out that the Irish people are probably the best in Europe in terms of solidarity, yet the Irish government has allowed a roaring trade with Israel. In fact, Irish and Israeli trade has increased no end since October 7th.
Wow.
Up until recently, the Irish Central Bank were still buying Israeli war bonds. The Israelis have gone on record to say that without the purchase of those bonds, there can be no war machine. Our central bank is literally supporting the Israeli genocide up until quite recently. The biggest centre point of culpability, in my opinion, is Shannon Airport. So it's used as a kind of a point for the American army to transport weapons so that the genocide can be carried out. Without Shannon Airport, it can't be done. American troops are through Shannon Airport several times a day. We've been protesting, people far more dedicated to this cause and doing a lot longer than I ever will, have been protesting a group called Shannon Watch since before the Iraq War, and it's still going on. And we make lovely speeches about it, and we say, I don't think they're carrying any munitions. I think that we checked the plane. No evidence, no transparency. It's all bullshit because we are terrified of pissing off the Americans, because we will go back to being an impoverished country if the Americans pull out. That's the propaganda anyway, and that's what we've internalized. So, yeah, I'm very happy to call out Ireland as, I would say, in terms of our government, the most two-faced, hypocritical, cowardly government in Europe when it comes to Palestine. But the people are the best.
Those are strong words. Speaking of Ireland and Irish people, now there's this one individual who comes to mind when you think Ireland, and
oh no,
this person is very kind of stereotypical, if you will. When someone thinks of an Irish stereotype, you think of this individual. I'm talking, of course, about Conor McGregor. And now, whilst, you'd rightly assume a lot of, or even most of, the Irish population are pro-Palestine, etc., Conor McGregor has taken a completely different stance. I think the other day as well, he tried to come for Liam Cunningham on Twitter. and Liam Cunningham humiliated him so badly he had to delete his comment. But it's like, what do you think explains that?
Jesus, that's a big question. Yeah, like, I kind of, my own pet theory on it is like Conor McGregor has built up such animosity towards him from ordinary Irish people. He is a star, undoubtedly a star globally, but amongst kind of grassroots, ordinary Irish people, he's a kind of a figure of fun at best. And then there's a revulsion against, his misogyny, his treatment of women. I think it was a recent court case where it was actually proven that he had committed rape. And he has found himself, I think, more and more looking for support from an Irish nationalist community that is very much kind of right-wing in its thinking. And it's a small enough group actually in Ireland, but it's being supported by right-wing elements in Britain and America. And that kind of cohort of Irish nationalism, which isn't Irish nationalism at all, I would argue. I mean, like, our revolutionary leaders were people like Roger Casement, who famously did extraordinary work to bring to light the crimes of the Belgian occupation and domination of the Congo. James Connolly himself an immigrant. You know, there's no real kind of logical, thoroughgoing connection between being a racist and being an Irish anti-imperialist. You know, you can't really make that connection. Our diaspora all over the world, to be anti-immigration in Ireland, I think puts you more in keeping and more in the thinking of a British ethno-nationalism than an Irish anti-colonial nationalism. But Conor has found a home amongst those people a little bit, and those people, which is largely an Irish-American run kind of operation rather than Irish people. You get all these people supporting Conor McGregor online saying, oh, what has happened to good old dear Ireland? And they're kind of naming these places in Ireland which either don't exist or they're using phraseology that no Irish person has ever used anywhere. And so that group are very much like anti-immigration. And so they've put the Palestine movement into some sort of leftist, Marxist, kind of radical communist kind of bracket, and then Conor's over here with his people trying to recreate a conservative, Catholic, white, anti-immigration Ireland that kind of no longer exists or arguably never existed. A lot of these people have a nostalgia for Ireland when it was this wonderful place, you know, say in the 80s where everyone was unemployed, everyone was immigrating, and there was a kind of a Catholic totalitarianism in the country where people, particularly women and children, were absolutely brutalized by the Catholic Church. Yeah. So it's this weird nostalgia mixed with a bit of racism, and it's massive ignorance as well. And I'm from a working class area myself. I want to be very careful not to be like, you know, because it's largely working class people that are kind of duped, I would say, into this kind of completely like racist ideology that was born again out of COVID with people on the internet with too much time on their hands. And actually it's all these people's fault as opposed to the ruling class in Ireland. It's you know, we're looking in the wrong places again. But that's where he finds himself. And when I speak about the ignorance, I talk about Conor McGregor saying things like, vote for me, I'm going to be the president of Ireland, and all of these Irish American racists getting behind it, when there's just no way that he would ever qualify to be president, because you've got to get like the backing of all these different groups, and then even if he became president, like it's a completely ceremonial role. He'd have no power on immigration whatsoever. Like you wouldn't know where to begin with the kind of stupidity that underpins his presidential campaign, you know. And also the ship has sailed. Like he can't. I mean, like the moment has passed now. Even if he could get all these kind of different groups to back him, but yeah, look, what's dangerous about it is that he's a very powerful guy. He's got a lot of backing behind him and stuff. Personally, and I'm going to say something a bit kind of left to centre here now. Personally, I think he probably has an issue with narcotics, right? And no, and I'm saying that out of a place of compassion rather than leading this kind of botched, poorly researched, racist kind of movement. I would love to see him get into therapy. You know what I mean? Because I don't believe anybody, no matter what they've said or done, I believe everybody should have an opportunity to heal. And like, I'm in recovery myself, and I would love to see him get some recovery, because I think the man is lost, and he probably needs someone around him to say, look, and I'm not condoning anything that he's done. Conor McGregor's a hot potato. I think you're getting a sense of that. But I would like to see him get therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole Liam Cunningham tweet thing, that's emblematic of it, because if he had positive influences around him, he probably wouldn't have tweeted it to begin with.
Well, exactly. And sorry, this is I was a long-winded way of saying that's where you find yourself aligning with Israel. If you get into this kind of racist, you know, all these foreigners, like they're besmirching Ireland, like then suddenly you look at the world through the prism of Palestinians are the enemy and Israel are the kind of the white people just trying to preserve, you know, this Judeo-Christian value kind of rubbish or whatever. Because like an Irish, and I think he would describe himself as an Irish nationalist from a working class background supporting Israel, it just makes no sense. Like, you know, it's like, why would you align with that ideology that hates you? Like, you know what I mean? They're so openly anti-Irish as well, the Israelis. Anytime I post anything online, they criticize me for being a bigot, and the way they do it is to hit me with anti-Irish bigotry. Like, they're just such a ridiculous group of people. Like, but anyway,
100%. And just to be on the safe side, I just had to do a little research. The Conor McGregor was found liable for sexual assault in a civil case.
Yes, in a civil case. Yeah, sure.
Just so we're on the safe side.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned something there, the whole nostalgia thing, right? And you see sometimes online they post like videos of like these old Victorian-esque, like London, how it looks. Look how clean it is. Look how great it is. And it's like I kind of get like, okay, you kind of long for a time in which you had some sort of, there was like a more English cultural kind of that was more prevalent in London, which is now obviously London is the way it is because of capitalism, etc.
Yeah.
But it's like, have you guys not read Charles Dickens? Right? It's like you got these videos of all these kids like.
Well, no, they haven't. Like,
yeah, these kids are all smiling in these videos, but like half of them probably chimney sweeps.
I was just gonna say, yeah. It's nostalgic for chimney sweeps, like.
It's like all the movies we saw, all the things we read growing up. It's like Charles Dickens. What was that? That famous Oliver Twist.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Like this was.
That's when kids were proper kids, like when they were willing to go into the coal mines and through chimneys.
Yeah. It's like, what exactly are you nostalgic for? And it's just like they cherry pick, and it's with everything. They cherry pick in order to somehow paint Britain of today or the world of today, Europe of today, as this kind of the cesspit.
Yes.
Of things, without understanding of why certain things are, without understanding why they don't have their jobs, or why towns are losing money, or why there's so many immigrants. There's no real exploration into why these things exist.
And also why, I mean, other people have pointed this out, but like why when you go into other countries and destroy them and uproot everyone, that some of them will maybe follow you home. Like, what do you want then? What exactly I'd love to scrutinize the desire. So the desire is to go back to the good old days where you went and brutalized countries and extracted their wealth, and you had good control out of them wanting to come to your country, like to try and rebuild their lives. So, and I think like that's a lot of where the Brexit kind of vote came from. It's like this kind of weird nostalgia for, as an outsider, it's easier for me as an outsider to see that the British nostalgia is ridiculous than the Irish one, because I'm kind of lost in the Irish one a little bit. But the British one to me is about empire. Like it's about, like Britain is a little bit of a laughing stock now.
100%.
Internationally. And I think the British establishment know that. And that's why you got things like GB News popping up, which is basically a relic like to the good old days. Then they want their empire back. Like, and even if that means getting rid of all the people who followed them home after imperialism, that will have to do. Like,
But it doesn't make sense though, because like, okay, you want your empire back, but you're just like, anytime America says jump, you say how high.
Exactly.
How exactly are you getting your empire back by being a vassal state for the Americans?
Or Israel. Like, I can't believe that, some of the leaders of the British Patriot movement are so openly, shilling for Israel. And there doesn't seem to be any tension with that. Like, I would respect Britain first, or I would respect America first if the people leading those movements actually did what they said. But it's always Israel first, so it's kind of cash first. It's like whoever's paying me first. I still can't believe that Tommy Robinson recently tweeted, "I love the IDF with a love heart, like of Israel." Like it's like what kind of some lost teenage girl was doing on her way home from in the airport, just picked this up, like.
And the people don't understand about Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who's an Irishman.
I know.
He's
Don't say that. Don't say that. Bring that up. I'll accept Conor McGregor being brought up, but not him.
Stephen was groomed by the Israelis to begin with. I mean, there's Loki's.
I know, amazing work. Yeah,
the guy's an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to ask you about how you viewed the British Empire growing up as a child, because like I remember when I was a kid in primary school, in America they call it elementary school. They were talking about British Empire, and the way they described it, and I remember this, they would say, "You see this tiny island here, ruled like a third of the world. Like how amazing is it that this tiny place controlled so much?" That's how I was introduced to the British Empire.
Yes.
So how were you guys introduced to it?
I mean, so again, our education system wouldn't be as radical as you would probably hope. Like I there's definitely a sense in Ireland of, because again, after the liberation of the south of Ireland, there was a kind of a good job done by the establishment in the South to try and go, look, the past is the past now, we need to kind of move on. So we spent a lot of, like, in my curriculum, there was a lot on World War II. There wasn't a whole lot on the British Empire. That's the thing. You're not really taught about it at all. But you're certainly not taught about, you know, the atrocities and the war crimes and the horror and the genocide that goes with any empire. Like, you just don't get into that at all. So I remember, like, being in my last few years of school and definitely in college, reading and kind of, in a weird way, it was exciting because I was like, there's kind of nobody really talking about this. This is mental. You know, that this just the country that colonized us, like, is so guilty of causing murder and mayhem all over the world and all these endless conflicts. Like, I mean, if you want to pick a conflict out of the air right now, like, the British were definitely involved in it, you know.
100%.
If you want to pick a disastrous partition, there was definitely a British diplomat, like, you know, with a few glasses of brandy and I'm just doing a random squiggle, like. So I felt like when it was particularly in school and in college, in early years in college, it was like, this country has done a masterful job at kind of just obfuscating the gory details. And now it's the main narrative that we probably had in school and in the mainstream media was like, British Empire, good sides, bad sides. I mean, we built a lot of roads,
A lot of train
you
tracks.
know, a lot of train tracks, and we obviously did that out of the goodness of our own heart, not to extract wealth directly from your country. Like, let's just put it behind us. So, to be honest with you, I kind of made it my life's work to not put it behind us because there's no learning, isn't there? You know what I mean? Like, if you don't know your history, there's a lot of people who voted for Brexit, I would say, that if they understood the history of their own empire. There's a lot of people who love Churchill and won't have a bad word said about him if they understood the racism and the horror of the Bengal famines. I think they would maybe just look again. So if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it over and over, you know. So the one thing I would say about the British Empire is, like, I don't know who controls this country, but you'd have to give them a pat on the back that more people don't know about just how horrific the British Empire. But then, to be fair, that's not unique to Britain. Like, it's only in later years, again in college, that I was reading about the French Empire, and again, they're masterful at hiding their crimes. What the Canadians did to their indigenous communities, the Australians, you'd have to go looking for it. Whereas the brutality in the Arab world or whatever, like, that's 24/7 on your TV screens. I mean, there's a BBC Newsnight about any of the brutal regimes in the Arab or Persian world, but we never call ourselves regimes at any point in history.
Yeah. I remember when I was in secondary school or high school, there was a teacher that I had that was I think maybe a bit on the radical side a little bit. And we were talking about South Africa and the Boers. And then she said, you know, the first people to implement concentration camps were the British.
That's right.
And it was just like this surprising thing, you know, because you just associate it with the Germans, obviously.
Of course.
But the problem with the Germans, or their most heinous sin, was doing what everyone else was doing, but in Europe.
100%.
But yeah,
White people.
to
To people that looked a bit like us, like, yeah, that was their big crime. I mean, like, the Nazi Holocaust wasn't even the first German Holocaust of that century, you know, but nobody really even talks about Namibia because it's like, that's just what happened. Even, like, I've been asked to speak at an anti-war demo in Ireland soon, and it's on the occasion of Hiroshima. It's in the anniversary of the Hiroshima bomb, and I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. And they were kind of saying it's an obvious point, but, like, I was just taken by the point. I was like, that's so, so true. There's just no way the Americans would have dropped that bomb on Germany. You know, like, it was a war against Germany and Japan. And I know Japan were holding out, and there's all sorts of reasoning for it's going to end the war and it's going to, you know, save all these other lives. But it would be unimaginable for the Americans to drop an experimental bomb that would have so much death and destruction on white people. It would be very hard for America to recover from that. Whereas Japan is like, that's kind of okay. Like, you know, you just experiment on kind of brown and black countries. Yeah. That's the white supremacist colonialist way, like.
They're, what are they German called? Honorary Aryans or something? That's what they call
them. That's right. Yeah.
I want to talk a bit about Lebanon.
Okay.
You went to Lebanon a few months ago, I think it was. And you've spoken about it multiple times, and it was quite an experience for you, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Was that your first time to Lebanon?
Yeah, first time. Always wanted to go. People had been telling me that there was something about Beirut that you would just kind of get as an Irish person, and I loved it. I have to say, it was one of the few places in that region that not only did I love it, I thought, in another world, I would live here.
Beirut's nice. I've been to
Love
Beirut.
it.
There's something about it. There's something
There is in
about
there,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also like, well, for me, it's the culture, the music. Obviously, the one of the most respected, or there's two most respected female singers in the Arab world. There's Kulthum in Egypt
Oh yes.
and Fairuz in Lebanon,
Yes.
and obviously she sings about Beirut and stuff. So like you just kind of like get into that kind of
Yes.
feeling.
Yes.
But you went for a large funeral, and it was probably like something that you might not have experienced before, right?
Oh, absolutely not. No. Well, first of all, there was like over 1 million people on the streets.
Yeah.
So the power of just all this energy of people and kind of held in the same moment for the same purpose, I was kind of in awe of it, to be honest. I was just thinking, is there anything in our world, in the West, that would kind of bring people together in this way?
Michael Jackson, maybe.
Maybe. So it's a combination of faith, but also a kind of an anti-colonial, again, determination that like we might not all agree with the actions of Hezbollah everywhere. We might disagree on all sorts of things, but we are unified against what Israel is doing to our country right now, and that was so clear. Like it's funny, like the Israelis have an extraordinary ability to bring people together. They really do, you know, because it's like, even with Iran recently, when I talk to people that I know, they're kind of saying this is a very factionalized place. Like, you know, the people have various degrees of enmity towards the ruling class, but we're all kind of quite united now at the moment, like in terms of like we're stronger in our rage against America and Israel, which I assume was the point of the attacks. It was because, you know, death to Israel, death to America. I don't think those sentiments are going to go away by bombing them like for 12 days, you know.
Yeah.
But to go back to Lebanon, no, I found it very moving, and I think I learned a lot about the kind of the factionalization in the region, and I got some sense of the Shia Sunni thing, which is just a whole other world to me. But I, rightly or wrongly, looked at Lebanon again through the prism of Ireland, and I met a bunch of people who were under occupation. I can see the Israeli presence in their country from where they brought me. I can literally see the outposts. I know that entity wants expansion. It's an expansionist project. If it can get out Lebanon, it'll take it. And I see a group that are fighting back through all sorts of ways, military resistance, cultural resistance against that occupation. And I feel like if you support resistance, if you support anti-imperialism, then the movement in Lebanon is something that you need to support. Excuse me.
What was the one thing that you found most moving in your time there?
Well, I was speaking to so we had an event last night in Palestine House, and there was a few people from Lebanon came along, and we were saying that I felt I got to know Hassan Nasrallah from speaking to people who knew him. So I had the most moving experience I had, I think, was probably meeting Abu Ali, who was known as Saeed's shield. So he was his personal bodyguard. We had a kind of a meet and greet, I suppose, is a Western way to look at it. The man was extremely shy, but he just had a presence about him and an authenticity. People were trying to shake his hand and touch the hand of the man who touched the man. And he was like, get away from me. Like, I don't want any of this. I'm just an ordinary person. And the idea of dismissing this whole group of people as terrorists, I think, was smashed by one moment for me where Israeli fighter jets flew across the stadium in Beirut where the funeral was taking place. Yeah. And for me, coming from Ireland, I was like, hold on a second, Lebanon is a sovereign country, yeah? How are fighter jets of a foreign army desecrating this poignant, important moment, the biggest state funeral in Lebanese history? how is this allowed? Like, if the Queen was being buried, if the German Chancellor was being buried, and another country's fighter jets flew over, we would be in World War III. But yet it's just barely made the news. I don't think it was in mainstream news. And in that moment, Abu Ali put his body over the coffin of Hassan Nasrallah, protecting him even in death as he did in life. And I just thought to myself, if that man is a terrorist, and if Donald Trump and Netanyahu are good guys, we have an upside down world. You know, so I didn't see integrity, authenticity, passion and dedication like it anywhere in the West, anywhere from the so-called good guy countries. So that moment summed up that, and I suppose walking through the streets with 1.4 million people coming up to me, some random white lad from Ireland, like asking me how I am and saying, do you want to come to my house? And like, anywhere I've been in the Arab world, I've had that friendliness, to be honest with you, or the Persian world. I don't know, would somebody of a different ethnicity get that type of welcome in Dublin or London? Like, I'm not sure.
To finish off, why don't you tell us what you have coming up next?
So, one of the reasons why I'm in London is because myself and Nicole Jenez, who is a wonderful satirist and a human rights activist, you'll know her from social media, Spanish-Romanian. She's the bane of my life, but I do love her. She and I have combined forces because I feel like not only is she great at what she does, but her heart is in the right place and she wants to do it for the right reasons. Like, if she wanted to be famous and go off and kind of like cash out or cash in, whatever the phrase is, she could have done it a long time ago. But she's in it for humanity. She does an awful lot of kind of fundraising behind the scenes, and I won't talk about it now because she doesn't want it out there, but she's a real deal. So we've decided to combine forces and create a new satire show to expand on what we're doing online. So rather than just doing videos on our phone and on Instagram, I think sometimes the pro-Palestinian movement can be very apologetic. The Zionists and the Americans have all the infrastructure, all the money, and they professionalise very well. We don't do enough of that, I think, on our side. So I would love to play a small part in trying to get not just a comedy, but more of this stuff, more of a media landscape that's kind of connected, a kind of an infrastructure. Particularly in the comedy front, I want to build what I would describe as an anti-imperialist Saturday Night Live. I'm so bored of watching American satire shows that basically take the piss out of Donald Trump and feel like they've done something significant. They never get to the root of colonialism, of wealth extraction, of capitalism. So we've shot our first season of a new satire show that we're calling Not On Our Watch, which is abbreviated to NOW. And we are expanding into season 2. We're looking for some help to do that. We've got Palestinian writers and actors already featuring in season 1. And with the help of God, inshallah, by season 2 or 3, we'll have a little machine going and bring in more actors and writers from around the world. And we will try to build something in the comedy world that isn't just people on their phones trying to slip through the censorship, that we're up, strong, have the infrastructure, we support each other, and we beat the enemy at their own game.
All the best with that.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Really enjoy that, bro.
All right, brilliant.